this evening will be joining us will be Kevin Concannon and Margo Crutchfield out of their Blacksburg home. And Kevin Concannon in August stepped down as the director of the School of Visual Arts at Virginia Tech and will retire at year's end. So congratulations, Kevin. I know you've been at Virginia Tech for numerous years and have really made an impact. As an art historian and curator, he has written extensively on the work of Yoko Ono and organized exhibitions of work by Yoko Ono and others, including Laurie Anderson, Willie Cole, and Marilyn Minter. And affiliation, of course, with the museum. You've been one of our guest curators and for the Yoko Ono Imagine Peace exhibition, and we'll screen share that. That was in 2013. It was great to have that here at the Tama Museum of Art, and also the community involvement as visitors came in and shared their messages of peace. And Kevin, anything, can you see the screen share as we go through some of the exhibition?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you'd like to add in about the Yoko Ono exhibition as we share this at the beginning.
Okay, that's a print from a series called Bag One, which was Lennon's first published portfolio of prints as an artist. And galleries were shut down on obscenity charges for showing them. They followed it up with an album called Two Virgins with the two of them naked on the cover, which prompted the same activity in record stores around the world. That's a record. It's a green vinyl record, obviously. It's meant to look like a Christmas wreath. You can't really see it that well unless you're on a large TV, but the label starts on one side with John Lennon and on the other side with Yoko Ono. And this was done back in the days of film before there were any fancy software programs, and they morph into each other. The picture sleeve shows a shoot during the actual recording of the record with the Harlem Children's Choir as the background singers. They managed to release this thing. I think they wrote it earlier, but they managed to release it like in December. So it didn't actually chart the way that they anticipated it would. So it got re-released several years in a row, but you hear it every Christmas. Happy Christmas, war is over. And it relates to War is Over If You Want It, which was the theme of that exhibition, Imagine Peace.
Well, thank you. And before I move on to Margo, Kevin, just share with us, what do you love to collect? Because I know we'll see that as we're going through, but kind of give us an overview.
So my primary interests are multiples, artist multiples, as well as conceptual art. And they're not necessarily connected, but the thread through them for me is conceptual art at the time in the late 60s, early 1970s when it began, posited that it wasn't so much the object, but it was the idea that was of primary importance. That's not true. The objects, one of the strange things about conceptual art is that even though it's not supposed to be visually primary, you always recognize, even if it's just type, you recognize who the artist is who did it. You can tell a Kossuth from a Lawrence Weiner, from a Jenny Holzer. And the multiples I really liked because these conceptual artists were trying to, essentially they were pushing back against the gallery system. They were trying to sort of not get themselves out of the business of making luxury goods for wealthy people. And they wanted things to be free or intangible. And multiples had been around for a while before that. But starting in the 1960s in Europe and in New York, Marion Goodman of the famous Marion Goodman Gallery started out as a multiples dealer. They made multiple objects that were usually identical, and they were very inexpensive, so everybody could collect art. It was art for all.
Wonderful one. We have some on view right now, and we'll show those in just a second. So Margo, we've known each other also for the past 10 years as you have been and worked at the Moss Center, Art Center at Virginia Tech as curator at large, but you started out and your background is perhaps atypical that you've lived in South America, North Africa, and Europe before coming to the US. And your curatorship has spanned across the U.S., from a curator focusing on the art of our times at the Aspen Art Museum, been at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, as well as senior curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland. And as I said, you are currently curator at large at the Moss Art Center at Virginia Tech. Tell us a little bit about what you love to collect, Margo. And I've enjoyed working with you as you've borrowed from the permanent collection and you've curated at the Moss Center. But in terms of your personal collection, what is your love?
Well, like Kevin, I always love ideas. I think all art has ideas, but I really fall for the sort of tangible color, the sort of vitality that paint has, the sensuality that an object can convey. I fall for that. But then I also have a very strong attraction to photography and how photography can reinterpret reality for us, as all art does. But anyway.
Wonderful, and I know we'll see both of that come alive as we tour your home and your collection. As Kevin, as you said about the multiples, would love to screen share, and thank you to both Kevin and Margo for their generosity and gifts to our permanent collection, and they've been on view in our Pop Power. And we'll see that just right now. So speak a little bit about the works hanging here that you gifted to our collection.
Those are by Nikki De Santa, who's a French-American artist. She is probably most famous for a walk-in architectural work called She, in English, a home, in I guess it's Swedish, in the museum that showed it. And it was a kind of a reversed birthing experience for visitors. It was a giant papier-mâché woman lying on her back, and you walked into her, and the gallery was inside and up above. She's always worked with images of women. The first series of things that she did that caught a lot of attention internationally, I showed two of them in a multiple show I did many years back in Akron. They were called shoot paintings. And she sold them as multiples. So what she did was she took a regular canvas, laid bladders full of paint on the canvas, then did a thin coat of plaster and then painted it white, let it dry. And when you purchased one, your instruction was to hang it on the wall and then shoot it. And the bladders would bleed paint down the canvas itself. It was kind of a critique of abstract expressionism. And she started out, she tells the story, her origin story for that series, which is her most famous, was that she had a breakup with a boyfriend. And so she took his shirt and put the wires from a dartboard over it, hung it in the gallery, and invited visitors to hit it with darts. So she's a feminist artist. And these are images of woman power. Serpents, the big Nana figure that's in front. That's what those things are about.
And it was wonderful to include this in our Pop Power from Andy Warhol to Jeff Koons. That was from the collection of Jordan D. Schnitzer. And I know most everybody on this call was able to see that exhibition and the works here. And we'll move on to In a Decade, which is on view right now. In our galleries, we are open Fridays and Saturdays 10 to 5 and Sundays 12 to 5. And it was a pleasure to kind of mine that gift from Kevin and Margo and select 10 works to curate and be on view in this exhibition, which highlights 62 works from the past decade of gifts to our permanent collection. And I'll hand it back over to Kevin and Margo. Kevin, I know we've taped you, so we have a virtual component that we're sharing also on our website.
So shall we begin the tour?
Yes.
All
So
right.
we're going to go ahead and begin the tour, and we're looking at, I think, the entryway. Is that right? And talk a little bit about the house.
We're actually starting in the dining room, I believe. So Mark, you want to talk about the house?
The house is a traditional 1935 brick house, and I love traditional architecture. molding, with high ceilings. But what I find so great is being able to contrast something contemporary with something more traditional. So that's really fun, and I think it works. So this is a work by Ardeen Nelson. It at first seems like an abstract composition, but it's not. If you look at it carefully, you'll see that it's images, it's a photograph, it's a large photograph. They're images of abandoned factories. That's the ceiling, that's conduit, that's crumbling paint and crumbling concrete. She's an artist from Columbus, Ohio, and what I find so compelling and why I wanted, we have two of them. We have the companion piece over here as well. Why I thought they were such great works of art was not only the artist's sense of composition, but that it speaks to the decay and decline of the manufacturing economy in the Rust Belt region. Of course, Ohio was part of that, and it really speaks to the rise and fall of economies in that area. So it really speaks to so much of what has happened in that place and in that region. And of course, we lived there for 10 years, so it reminds me of everything there. The next work, I guess, is this fabulous piece by the Los Angeles artist, Phillip Argent. He's an artist that increasingly among artists are using sort of integrating digital technologies into more traditional paint practices. He composes this on the computer and then paints it. It's very meticulously painted. If you can see, there's some very sharp outlines. It's really delicate in the imagery and the execution. But when you come back from it, it's got this aerial perspective. It's almost as if you're looking from maybe outer space onto some kind of floating continent or a city, or to me, it could be a computer chip, and you can see the glow of the paint behind it. To me, that sort of speaks to the digital ethos, the digital era, where we're looking at the glow of our computer screens.
Yeah, it's very striking.
I love that piece because the color is so stunning.
Well, and I'm sure as you walk into the dining room, that draws you in.
So this, the next piece here is quite tiny. I think it's about 4 inches long and about 2 inches high. It's by an artist named Bill Radowick, who sadly passed away at a young age. He was a friend of ours in Cleveland, but he had had a fairly successful career showing in Los Angeles galleries before he moved back to Cleveland while we lived there. This is from a series of pieces called Us Study, and they, as best I can tell, are made from the little miniature figures that you might acquire to put in architectural rendering models for things. And this man here is simply staring at a green wall with nothing on it, quite intently. I really like this piece, and whenever we have parties, people invariably find their way over to this corner and stare in disbelief.
Well, to me, it speaks to the whole monumentalism of abstract expressionism and, you know, the huge bravado of that era, because you have this huge canvas and this tiny, tiny person. Mm-hmm. Moving on.
This next piece is by an artist named Zhang Hong Yi. He's a Chinese artist who works in Belgium and in Beijing. And this piece is, it's a painting, but we actually saw it and purchased it at an art fair called Art on Paper. And the thing that really attracted me to it, now the artist will tell you that he's inspired by Impressionism, and I can well imagine how that is. But Margo's moving back and forth, and hopefully it's showing up on your screen as you move across the painting. It's made of multiple little pieces of rice paper formed into cones, which are hand painted, each one of them, and then jammed into the base. And it, as you walk by it, it transforms from a red painting into something more like a dead leaf on the other side. And it also changes quite a bit over the course of the day, and depending upon what kind of light is on it. The thing that really attracted me to this is I'm a fan of minimalism. And minimalism, you know, sort of the cubes or the big L beams sitting in the gallery that don't seem to have any particular interest. Actually, where the magic is on those pieces is as you ambulate around them, as you walk around them, and you become conscious of how it looks completely different. The object itself hasn't changed, but it looks completely different once you're sort of from one side to the other. This is one of my favorite things currently.
I can imagine that. And you can see it on Zoom even, that change in color.
Ah, great. This next piece is work by an artist named Diana Cooper. Those of you who've patronized the Moss Art Center may recall that I think it was in 2013 when it opened, and the very first commission for the Grand Lobby mural was this artist, Diana. This is a much earlier piece that we've had for quite a while. This piece is, it really speaks to the origins of her work, which have a lot to do with doodling. So again, I'm not sure how it will come off with our iPad technology here, but it's a multi-dimensional piece. It's three-dimensional. So there's a piece of board that clearly began with doodles, but you can also see at the top left, there's things that are attached to it. So there's collage elements. And on the top right, there is a projected piece of mylar that projects off the surface that has its own doodles on it that relate to the original doodles. I love this piece. It reminds me of sitting at a faculty meeting, working for a school of art, looking over the shoulder of more talented people who can actually make these things than me. And I see these more often than I should confess.
So now we're going to
at faculty meetings.
Now we're going to.
So I think the next room is the hallway. Oh, I'm sorry, is the hallway. And Margo is going to talk about this piece here.
So this is, again, one of my favorite pieces. It's a garden scene. It's a botanical work. It's a dahlia. It's the flower, a dahlia, and the actual title of the piece is like 30 characters long. I can't even pronounce it. But what's so interesting about this is that, well, it's a photograph, but it's not done with traditional photographic techniques. It's created with a scanner outdoors. The artist has a flatbed scanner that he sets up in his garden and hooks it up to a computer and lets it scan throughout the evening. So it captures over time this image of the flower. And what I love about it is how, number one, it sort of, again, has this digital feeling to it, but it captures the fluidity of perception, the fluidity of the nighttime, the fluidity of what surrounds us, the fluidity of perception and what is out there.
And we did screen share the image because I think you really need to see this one in person to see the strikingness of it. So
and it's pretty big. I mean, it's a big image, and the coloration is just so rich. The deep darks, and then the contrast almost feels like moonlight on the dahlia. So an interesting twist on landscape photography. Then over here, we have a smaller work. This is probably 12 inches by 10 inches. And it's by an artist named Gianna Comito. And it's an abstract, an example of geometric abstraction. And you've got multiple abstract forms sort of intersecting each other, intersecting planes. And what I like about it is that even though it's small, each section draws you into a different world. The composition is complicated, but still intriguing, and it just mesmerizes you. You could look at this for a long time and just sink into it and go through it to someplace else.
Okay, so the next item here is this is a print by the artist Peter Halley, who was part of the Neo Geo movement in the 1980s. He's still quite active. We recently, back before COVID, when we got to see exhibitions, I think one of the last we saw was one of his exhibitions. Halley is known, we bought this thing, this is one of the first things we bought together in the early 1990s in a Washington gallery. And we really liked it because the piece it looks like a painting on paper, but but it's a print. It's an edition of 50.
And it's huge.
And it's sort of a signature piece as well. Halley's work often deals with multiple issues of imprisonment and sort of the prison system and cells. So it's here is a cell that could be a cell of a prison window.
Or a microchip.
Or a microchip. And this here, the rest of it sort of plays into the idea of circuits. So it's a piece that's about contemporary society in terms of the digital. It's made in very traditional ways, but it also addresses social issues as well.
And I love the day glow paint.
Over here, we have the Jenny Holzers. So these Jenny Holzers that we're looking at, they're 10 by 10 inch lithographs. I got these probably in 1986 at Keith Haring's Pop Shop in Lafayette Street in New York. And it was, there were 10 of them. And this, I couldn't hang it 5/5 because of space limitations. So there's another piece that's hiding out in the laundry room that goes with it. When we have a different situation, it'll be hanging 5/5. The pieces themselves, I think I bought them for $10. And when you bought them, Holtzer actually intended for you to take them and paste them up all over Soho. So back in the day, in the 1980s, these things were pasted up all over Soho, which at the time, of course, was the gallery district in New York City. These are called Inflammatory Essays, is the series these are from. And she's taken a bunch of, and she's written these texts that are, some of them seem okay, and then some of them, like so much of her work, you read them and you think, you start to get sucked into the idea, and then you realize, wow, this is crazy, or this is disturbing. So she's an artist who works with text. She would be considered a neo-conceptual artist. Conceptual art sort of starts in the mid-60s into the 70s, and by the 80s, it's known as neo-conceptual artist. Holzer and Barbara Kruger were among the sort of big champions. And what we saw there, of course, was a shift from a primarily male-dominated world of conceptual art to something quite different in the 1980s.
And they're both artists are social activists, very serious social activists.
This piece here is a poster for an exhibition that Robert Rauschenberg did in 1980 at the Louisiana Museum. And it was a gift from Leo Castelli, who was his dealer at the time, one of the great dealers of all time, art dealers. And it's signed. It's a gift to me. Right, a gift to Margo. Did I misspeak? Okay.
I had to put that in there.
All right, so it's a gift to Margo, who was working at the Aspen Art Museum at the time on a project with Castelli. So this next piece is quite tiny, but it's a gem. This is a piece, you have to move back to get light on it. It's a piece from Betsy Bannon. I guess it's not showing up that well there. It's quite tiny. It's about 3 inches square. And what you're looking at, it's called Over Nebraska from 2017. And Betsy, as many of you probably know, is interested in flight. So her early works were images of stewardesses and so on. And this is something seen from a plane overboard. And it's very abstract. It's almost cubist and quite tiny and quite special. So,
I love tiny works as well as large works.
So in the bathroom here, we have another few quite tiny works. I think we have to get back to see the light on it. And this one is by an artist named Dominic Falcione, who was he was the preparator, essentially, for the gallery at the University of Akron, back when I worked in Akron in the 20-aughts. This and the companion piece on the other side of the window over here they are sections of gallery wall that he sanded down from various paint jobs over the years. And so there were dozens of these things when I purchased these. But what you're looking at are the remains of layer upon layer. It's like an archaeological dig into the history of the gallery and what it showed over many years. The next piece here is a piece by Joe Kelley, local artist Joe Kelley, who I believe sometimes works over there at the Tubman Museum. It's on wood panel. It's paint on prepared wood panel. And I really like it. It has this sort of ghostly image. Someday I'm going to have to figure out how to hang it near the Terry Clark that we'll see in a few more minutes, which also has that luminous quality. On the wall here in the powder room is a piece by an artist named Ingrid Kalam, another artist that Margo worked with. And the title of this piece is Drawing for Postcard to Margo, in case there was any doubt about it this time. And what Ingrid did at the time is she's a Los Angeles-based artist, and she would travel around the streets and make trace drawings of stains of various types on the sidewalks around Los Angeles, and then make paintings out of those they're stain paintings, of course, but it's not stain painting a la Helen Frankenthaler. They're stains that are outlined and then reproduced as an artwork on the, well, typically she does them on the floor, she does them on the wall, she does them everywhere. This is a study for one of those pieces.
The project that I did was a huge installation. I don't know, the gallery was probably 3,000, 4,000 square feet. She traced the floors of the New York Stock Exchange. She got permission going all the way up to the top to do this in the evenings with guards watching, because no one else is allowed in there. And this was right when there was the collapse in 2008, 2009, when there was the economic collapse. So it was a very topical and timely project that had to do with capitalism and the global in financial systems. It was in a trilogy of exhibitions that I organized called The Global Arena, Money, Power, and Politics. Sounds like today.
All right. So now
let's go over to here.
okay.
So this is a striking, it's a photograph mounted on aluminum, and it's a still life, which goes back to the Flemish and Dutch still life tradition of the 16th and 17th centuries, where artists portrayed a tabletop composition of fruits and meats and flowers to sort of portray the abundance of life, but also the passing of life. So this contrast between life and death. And so this is a 21st century reinterpretation of that. She is Dutch, she's from Amsterdam. And what is so striking about this is that the focus is so stark. The colors are so rich against this background that's so purely black. It's an arresting image that just sort of stops you in your track. So it's a reinterpretation of the Vanitas tradition in 21st century terms. I just love it.
I can see why.
All right.
And you have a second one from that same artist.
Right. And this one's a grasshopper. Again, beautiful because of the color, striking because of what it says. I mean, it's obviously a dead grasshopper, but you know, you have this portrayal of life as beautiful, even though it passes. So let's go to Joe Kelley.
Okay.
You missed him.
There we go.
So Joe Kelley, everybody probably knows Joe Kelley. He's been here for so long and been a really key artist in our community. And, you know, he does this whole sequence of birds. Again, I showed an exhibition of his showing, you know, this multitude of birds. When you go into his studio, he has these barrels where he has so many of these. These are like, this is like 3 inches by 3 inches. This might be 5 inches or 4 inches by 4 inches. But he paints these on a daily basis or periodically, initially as sort of a exercise in color, in, you know, combining different colors, and they're always birds. But to me, if you look at them, they seem to somehow capture personality. I mean, it's uncanny. It really is uncanny. And they're also very beautiful. And birds have such a strong symbolic resonance across all cultures, across all history. As, you know, the connector between the earth and the sky, life and death, the messenger between the heavens and the earth. So these are really poignant works. They're small, tender, but really beautiful.
All right.
Yoko,
So we're heading into your living room now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Oh, right in the entryway.
By the way to the hallway there. So this is a small piece by Yoko Ono. It's called Touch Me, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It was produced in 2008. And again, it's not a great image I can see here, but it's a small, it's probably, I don't know, 7 by 10 or maybe a little less. And it's a blank white canvas that she signed in the bottom in the center, YO08. And then a piece of plexi is applied to the front that would normally be the glass on it, and it's laser cut with the words "Touch Me." Obviously, people generally, for those of you watching at home, you're not generally encouraged to touch things in museums. So this was a gift for her birthday party in 2008 at Joe's Cafe at the Public Theater in New York. And whenever you go to a birthday party, you get a gift bag, a swag bag at the end, and usually there's an addition to work that you get. I think she made 300 of these, and they went to party guests, and I think Printed Matter and maybe Art Metropole in Montreal sold them for a while.
And you were of course at her birthday party.
Yes.
Which...
So this is Sam Krish. It's
Yes.
one of his extraordinary photographs. It's called Passages, I think number 7. And it's an image of the waterways at the end of the earth between Antarctica and Patagonia, I believe. What's compelling to me about this image is that it shows the ferocity of nature, but also the beauty of nature, and it captures it. It's a crystalline moment that's still, even though what's being portrayed is full of danger. To me, every time I pass this, it makes me want adventure. It makes me want to go there, to get away, to explore. And I think Sam has captured all of those things in a beautiful image.
Okay.
You want to do the Yoko Ono?
All right. So there are a few more Yoko Onos here. These two pieces in the corner are keys. Yoko is a conceptual artist. Yoko, I mentioned earlier that in the 80s, conceptual art became a woman's game to some degree. But in fact, Yoko was making conceptual art before Kossuth, before Lawrence Weiner. And so often the key is an image that she often uses. In the top one, it's a glass key, and she made several glass keys. This one is called A Key to Open the Universe. And this one came as a bonus item in a CD box set in a road case that was sold by Ryko when they reissued all of her music on CD for the first time. Back in the early 90s. And that actually sort of jump-started her career again. People started listening to Yoko records again, and she made many more than she'd made up until that point since then. The Fluxus piece, Fluxus was a group of artists with which Yoko was associated. And what you're looking at here, the envelope is actually an old cash envelope, a payroll envelope. And the printing on it says Self-Portrait by Yoko Ono, 1965, framed. And that has made some of us here may remember the old-fashioned, I guess maybe they were toys, but it was kind of like a letterpress rubber stamp, and you got tweezers and all the individual letters, and you slid them into a track on a rubber stamp to make this. So it's made with a children's toy, which is very Fluxus. And then this piece over here, it's difficult to see in this light. It's a square piece of tin that at the time that it was originally sold in 1965 was reflective. But she's written on it, Self-Portrait with Imaginary Frame, 1965, Yoko Ono. So it is actually related to some of the multiples that we gave the Taubman, specifically the boxes of Smile, which are little boxes, and when you open them up, it says on the top, box of Smile, you open them up, and you see the mirror at the bottom, and invariably you smile. So we're going to do the box.
Fly.
Oh, okay, Fly. So this is another Yoko Ono piece. This is called Fly. This piece is from, this is a piece from an exhibition I did of multiples back at Akron. It's a step ladder, and there's a plaque on top that says Fly 1. actually went to borrow it from a collector, Gil Silverman, who since gave his Fluxus collection to the Museum of Modern Art. And I can't remember, he had already promised it to somebody. So Yoko told me that I should just recreate it to the specification. So I had a crew actually build this thing. And in the gallery, the idea for the ladder was that you were going to climb up on the ladder and then fly by jumping off in the gallery. I'm always surprised when I show this object in a gallery setting that galleries will actually allow that, because in my experience in the museum world, liability insurance reigns supreme. But people jumped off and nobody got hurt. On the wall above is a poster that is in fact associated with the Imagine Peace exhibition that was at the Taubman in 2013. This was a later iteration of that exhibition. When we did it in Florida at the Rauschenberg Gallery in Florida, and she's got Imagine Peace written in multiple languages from around the world. World peace is her great theme in her work, thus the Imagine Peace show.
Well, and Kevin, you're the principal scholar really on Yoko Ono. We'd love to screen share a photo of you and Yoko.
Oh.
So
Okay.
There we go.
So that's I brought
There you are.
The Oberlin College because her grandfather was the first foreign student, I think, certainly the first Japanese student to go and like a century earlier, her great-grandfather maybe, to go to Oberlin College. So they asked me to sort of inveigle her to go out there and do an event, and that's from that event.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Villareal.
The Villareal, the piece that we're looking at there, you probably come back.
You can't really see it very well.
It's a Leo Villareal. Leo Villareal is best known for the Bay Bridge project in California, Northern California. He is also very well known for the underground moving sidewalk that connects the west and east wings of the National Gallery. And so it's called Bulbox 3.0. It's about a foot square. And this could have been an element in a larger project, but it's actually programmed. There's a program hardwired into it. You turn it on, it announces itself as Bulbox 3.0 by Leo Villareal. And then it will go on for
ad infinitum.
Ad infinitum, making various designs and patterns on the screen. The television screen here is showing a Marilyn Minter video. Marilyn Minter is an artist who Margo's done exhibitions with. I did a little exhibition recently with her. She's quite amazing. She's a painter primarily, and she made her living for many years. Marilyn is kind of an artist. Every artist in New York knew Marilyn, but not a whole lot of people outside that sort of very tight art world in New York knew her until maybe 20 years ago, when at the age of 50 something, she became an overnight success in the minds of many people, but had been working for many years. She made her living as a fashion photographer, and she started doing projects where she would take outtakes from her fashion shoots as the basis of her paintings. And then she began, I believe this was her first, she'd made one video before this to promote a show, but this was her first real effort as a video artist. And she's used the models. It's being shot up through from the floor through a glass table. And there are fashion models who she's convinced somehow to slather wedding cake decorations and Jell-O mixed with vodka around a table to make abstract paintings on the table. It's also a bit of a spoof on Jackson Pollock. If you remember the Hans Nalmuth video where Pollock is shot from underneath making his paintings. And then this, Margo will tell us about.
This is a smallish painting by Roger Sagerman. I don't know, it's about a foot square. And I don't know if you can tell how rich and thick the paint is. There's several layers. There's a burgundy layer and a white layer, and then this profusion of blue brush strokes, all of which come out and end in the same kind of gesture. All the gestures are sort of similar, and they end in a sort of a drip. It's very time-consuming and laborious process, meditative for him. It's interesting that he sees his work almost as a prayer. He's a Hasidic Jew, and this is part of his practice in terms of meditation, in terms of thought, and in terms of creative expression. So it's, for me, when I first saw this, of course, I fell for the sensuality of the paint, not knowing about the religious or metaphorical implications of how the artists saw this. So the texture, the richness of the paint, all of that is really, really attractive and really intriguing.
And Kevin, before you go away, can you get a side shot too? I think that will accentuate what Margo is talking about, as you can see then from the side as well.
It's thick, unguent paint. I mean, you just want to like sink into it.
Not a good idea. Okay, so the next several items here. There, again, I mentioned when Yoko had parties, she had many, she's not well these days, but up until a few years ago, she had several parties a year. There was a birthday party. She gave out awards at the Museum of Modern Art called a Courage Award. And she gave other awards out when she did her lighting of the Imagined Peace Tower in Reykjavik, Iceland, in honor of John Lennon. So this is from the, this piece here is from the dedication ceremony for the Imagined Peace Tower in Iceland. And it's a key, another key to open the sky here instead of the universe. This one opens the sky, and it's one of 600. So these were given as gifts to her guests at the after party from the lighting ceremony in Reykjavik. She's done several of these things. This is a Happy Birthday, Yoko from 2012. And it's just a kaleidoscope, and it has sort of peace and love written on the inside. This is a, whoops, this is a Fluxus document, a Fluxus scroll. Which is one of the early documents of Fluxus, which has lots of data. It's something obviously of great interest to an art historian, including phone numbers and addresses of artists you might want to reach. The next item is a piece by Eric Standley, who's a member of our faculty at Virginia Tech. Eric's shown his work there, and I believe
at the Towman too.
Correct. We've had an exhibition, Daphne, as well as we have a piece up currently. And Eric was part of our curated crib. So we actually visited his studio, saw his process in action in that laser cut. And so most people on this evening will have seen that as well, and his process with his sketches. So we'd love to see, and I think we have a screen share so you can get up close to this one.
Yeah. So they're laser cut and just hundreds of layers of paper. They're based on stained glass windows, Islamic decor, Islamic art. He recently traveled to I believe the Arab Emirates, and it sort of inspired a whole new body of work. This serpent that you're looking at across the screen.
No, we still. There we go.
The snake, you might want to move back to get the light on it. Pull back, yeah. This is by a colleague of ours named Henri DeHahn. Henri, for a few years, was director of the School of Architecture at Virginia Tech. He stepped down a few years ago. He's still on the faculty there teaching. And he's recently taken up, he's interested in sort of Appalachian culture. And he recently took up this, I guess, hobby of finding branches that were particularly interesting to him and making serpents of them. If you drive by their home on Main Street in Christiansburg, you can see he's got very large ones that are on the front lawn of his home. Next item here is a work by Kehinde Wiley. It's called After la Negresse. It's a series of 3 sculptures. It's one of a series of 3 sculptures that he did. And these were produced by a company that did multiples. They're no longer functioning to my knowledge. They closed business a few years back. And it's based on an 1872 sculpture of a freed Black woman that was part of the abolition movement. She was a very beautiful woman, and he's just adopted the pose for a young Black man, and it's not necessarily clear that he's got a Lakers t-shirt on. So you know he's definitely not of the same vintage there. The bottle next to it is one of the first Christmas gifts I received from Yoko after I began working with her in '96, so a few years later. This one was made as an addition for a Christmas gift for her friends, and it's a bottle like you'd find washed up on the water, but the little piece of paper in it simply says, "Remember, Yoko 99." And then this small piece up on the wall here is a piece by an artist named Terry Clark, who is a Cleveland-based artist. A friend of mine who now runs gallery in San Antonio owned a piece of this artist that I really coveted, and as a going away present, he got that for me, which I really love. And one of the best things about this piece, it's just pieces of plastic, basically. And one of them, there's a tube, sort of cut of a pipe, and inside of it, a plate with patterns on it that sort of day glows around it. And one of the best things about this current installation is that it complements this painting that Margo is going to talk about by an artist named Jeff Elrod.
So Jeff is, he's a Los Angeles artist, and this is pretty big. It's one of my favorite paintings. Another artist who works digitally, he composes on the computer and then paints his composition onto the canvas. This involves a lot of cutting with tape, though, because you can see the lines are very intricate, and it's very sprightly. There's this burst of color, the burst of orange and yellows, and it's just full of energy. It's just full of life, and to me, it's joyful. It's a joyful painting. I love it.
And you, Robin Rose? Okay.
So in here, we have another little gem. This is Susan Jameson, another wonderful artist living in Roanoke. She works at egg tempera, which is so unusual. I mean, it's totally original. I don't know any other artist who works with egg tempera. And her practice is sort of an exploration of the female persona, woman as the earth, woman as mystery, woman as witch, woman as healer, woman as lover, woman as an embodiment of so many wonderful things. It's delicate, but has a very strong image. You see pain, you see mystery. It's a metaphor for the unknown. I just love her work. This is another small painting by an artist whose name is Susan Danko. It's acrylic on panel, and her subject is the environment, how the environment is vulnerable to climate change. It's a vibrant portrait of life, but at the same time, you can see there's this glow of danger in the corner. The composition is intriguing, and it just brings a bit of the outside, a bit of nature into my home office. She had I did a big one-person exhibition of hers, and she did an entire huge wall of paintings this size. So it was like an enormous canopy of these gems. Okay. So this is a work by my sister. My sister, who was a gallerist. She ran the most important gallery in Paris, and then a gallery in New York and Chicago. After she stopped being an artist, which I'm sorry she did, but anyway, this is a watercolor on cut paper, sort of a collage, and it's very special to me. Let's talk about Jenny Holtzer. You talk about it.
Okay, so Jenny Holtzer, we have already seen those lithographs. This is a series of wooden postcards, of which there are a total of 17 scattered around. And they are actually postcards. They were mailed. I believe one of them, I can't recall which one, was mailed to Margo by a director at the gallery she was associated with in the 90s as part of the correspondence, I guess, of Margo being interested in the work. They have, these are truisms and the survival series. So the truisms, things like abusive power comes as no surprise. Lack of charisma can be fatal. Men don't protect you anymore. Raise boys and girls the same way. And my favorite, appropriate here for the evening of collecting, money creates taste.
This is my favorite.
Yeah. And Margo's favorite here, protect me from what I want. Another comment on capitalism. So this is Marcel Duchamp. This is called the Boîte en Valise. This is the very recent edition, a 2016 edition, and it is a copy of the edition G that was produced in 1968 during Duchamp's lifetime. No other official editions have taken place until this one, which is an edition of that version of the edition, which began in 1938 and was first exhibited in 1941. They are miniature replicas of all of Duchamp's major work. Some of you may be familiar with the top piece here is called Air de Paris, and it's a small pharmaceutical piece of glass. And on the bottom, of course, is the famous fountain, or urinal. Oh, sorry, I lost control of the iPad there. On the bottom is a urinal, which he exhibited as a sculpture called Fountain. And in the center, it's translucent. It's the large glass that's at the Philadelphia Museum. Lastly, we have a couple more pieces. This is Jim Hodges, who's a sort of conceptual artist, came to prominence in the 90s. It's really a chalkboard. The chalk on it is not part of Hodges' work. It's simply a chalkboard that says me on the top and you on the bottom. It comes with erasers and colored chalk, and it's called Two-Way Mirror. So this is the rise of participatory art, or relational aesthetics, as it was called during that period.
And the last piece we're going to talk about is Joanie Bukowski, again, an artist who is here in our region, who is so prolific and so talented. This is acrylic on birch panel, and it's abstract, but speaks to the energy of nature, combustion, synergy, energy, life coming into being. Her husband is an entomologist, and so this whole idea about how life emerges in the forest, I think, informs them.